So can everybody see my screen okay? All right, great. Well, I'll just do a quick intro. I think we're going to have a pretty small crowd today, so I'll try to leave some time for some question and answers. And for future sessions, please put any additional items you want to hear about in the future in the chat window, and I will try to address those. So my name is Jody Gaver. I think a few of you know me. I'm the TSP, or Technical Solutions Professional, for the North Central Territory. So that's Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota. And my area of expertise is Windows deployments. I've only been at Microsoft since November of 2017, but before that I spent a couple years as a System Center consultant working for Microsoft partners, and prior to that I spent 6 years working at the Kent ISD, primarily working with Windows deployments and application deployments. So I'm going to run through several different things today. I've had a lot of questions relating to what version of Windows 10 should I deploy, what edition should I deploy, and how should I deploy it. So kind of why 1803? Well, 1803 is this year's April update, and it was designed to really help make the most of your time. It allows you to share files over Bluetooth, find focus by blocking out distractions. You can go back in time on the timeline and look for projects, and you can see those across your phone. It's also packed just full of extra tools and things to boost creativity for both staff and students. So I'm going to run through these features kind of quick because as IT people, features are nice, but we mostly care about how easy it is to deploy and how we're going to manage it and maintain it, correct? All right, so some of these features, new ones, Timeline, the Focus Assist, Nearby Sharing, and the improvements we've made with Edge, inking, 3D, photos, accessibility, and some others. So the Timeline feature, Windows now lets you go back in time across activities you did across all your devices, so you can jump back and forth in them like you never left. You can easily scroll back in time to find things you were working on earlier today or even a few weeks ago. Now, as a help desk manager, I find this to be a very helpful tool. I don't know how many calls I would get where people couldn't find a document or couldn't remember where they saved what. So I'm very excited about this. You can also find activities very easily. On the new taskbar icon, you can see all your activities specifically grouped each day by hour, including things you did using Edge and Office 365. And this is across your different tablets and mobile devices. Focus Assist. As IT people, we don't need this at all. This allows you to get more done by easily blocking notifications, sounds, alerts, and to allow a distraction-free work time. So this is a great thing if you're preparing a presentation or your head's down working on some kind of project that you can't have all those notifications popping up. You can also create specific, basically rules that allow certain things to get through. So if a said manager, you always have to get their emails, or for whatever reason you have to get certain notifications, you can set rules for that. The new Nearby Sharing, I know we've kind of had this on iOS for a while, but with Windows now we can finally share our videos, photos, documents, and websites with people and devices near us over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So this is, like I said, videos, photos, documents, web pages. It's literally just a click and share. And your computer automatically picks the fastest way to share your file or web page. So whether it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, it'll pick the best one for you. And it'll also show you who's available, what devices are nearby. Microsoft Edge. I know we're all using Edge, right? Well, I can honestly say I use Edge for probably 99% of what I do. And it's really come a long way. It also has the clutter-free printing now. It has Edge for mobile. And we have the new features like mute to tab, autofill, full screen reading, and more EPUB book options. So Windows inking improved. This is designed for a 30 to 50% improvement in latency, and this is by far the fastest Windows inking experience yet. You just use your digital pen in any text field, tap a space, like a search box. You can expand the writing area and edit whatever simple intuitive gestures. All right, 3D in Windows 10 improved. I don't know how many of you have played with this 3D in the mixed reality viewer. It allows you to record a video with animated 3D models. You just click and remix 3D to find animated models, or you can bring in static 3D models with one click. You can also add to your PowerPoint presentation by adding these 3D models that allow you to rotate them and add to your presentation. All right, Eric, I see your note. Yeah, I think there might have been a mix-up on the time frames, but we're recording this, and I pre-recorded another session that is available for everybody to view at other times too, just because I know we're all super busy. All right, Microsoft Photos, choose a star. Like, I love my son. I love this feature. You can click a button, select someone, and Photos will automatically create a video about them using photos and videos from your collection. Accessibility. I like to bring this up because at the schools that I used to work with, they would pay a lot of money for accessibility software, and a lot of this stuff is built into Windows 10 and Office 365 now, so we're finding a lot of schools are able to save a lot of money that they don't have to buy these anymore. You can control these accessibility features from one place in the ease of access settings where they're grouped under visual, hearing, and interaction. You can get text suggestions while you type. You can make reading easier with grammar tools that break words down into syllables and highlight parts of speech, such as nouns and verbs. Personally, I think this would be a great tool for us adults, too. We can listen to books and web pages. Oh, why the asterisk? Well, you could, like I said, getting the suggestions while you type, this is kind of, well, it's a work in progress, so some of those suggestions may be what you want, and it might not be exactly what you're looking for. All right, so why would I deploy 1803 instead of 1709? Well, all the features I listed. We didn't even get into the security side of things. There are so many security enhancements that have been built into 1803 now, along with our Windows Defender stack. But on top of that, you're not as far behind. We have that new kind of 18-month window to stay up to date on these feature upgrades. And so if you deploy 1803 now, by the time the school year was around in the fall, there's going to be a new version out. So it's just keeping you that far ahead of the game. And most likely, if you go 1803 right now, any issues you come across will most likely be resolved before the school year starts with a Windows update. And on top of that, the next upgrade will be even quicker and less disruptive. Each of these feature upgrades is getting smaller and smaller and less disruptive. You'll find it pretty much just runs in the background, and then you'll get a notification for a restart at the end, and then when it reboots, there's a little bit of configuration going on like we're used to, but it's not like before. If you're going from like 1511 to 1803, that's going to be a much bigger upgrade process, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Reasons you may still deploy 1709. Software that isn't supported in 1803. I ran into a local community college just recently that they had a little bit older version of Deep Freeze that there wasn't support for 1803 yet. So they're still stuck on 1709 for a majority of their devices. 2, you've already built your image for the year and there's not enough of you to go around and you're just going to go with 1709 because that's what you've built and tested. Or you were told to. And I'm sure there's plenty of other reasons, and feel free to put those kind of ones in the chat window. I'd like to share as much of this with other people as possible, other reasons behind not deploying the latest and greatest. Other than we've never released anything before that wasn't absolutely perfect. Why would we be cautious about just deploying 1803? Because yeah, something new. It's a little bit scary. We a little bit of fear of the unknown, but I can assure you we've got a lot better at releasing good feature upgrades that have gone through extensive testing. I can honestly say on the Microsoft side, we run the new version before it's released a long time before you guys ever get it, so we get to do a lot of thorough testing. Yes. I have to add this comment in here. Somebody commented about me actually commenting earlier at an engagement about not releasing something till it's been out for a while. And that's very true. But on the other note, depending on the size of your environment, the complexity of your environment, how many applications you have, I found a lot of schools don't have that much software out there anymore. Most of them are web-based applications, and we've been having really, really good success with that. So again, this kind of goes back to your gut feeling and how much time you've had to do testing. If you've never tested 1803 in your environment, you haven't had time to set up the group policies, then no, I would probably hold off a little while. Okay, so another scenario. What if I'm still on Windows 7? Or for that matter, 8, 8.1, XP. There's a little bit of that out there. You can upgrade to Windows 10. There's a couple different ways to do this. We can use an SCCM task sequence for the upgrade, which I will actually cover, or you can do a manual upgrade. The nice part about doing an upgrade from Windows 7 to 10, 8 to 10, or even 10 to 10 is you can always roll back. I helped a larger customer at my previous job go from LTSB to current branch with an upgrade task sequence. And there's also a lot of control with an upgrade task sequence. Usually if you're upgrading your Windows, you're also upgrading Office and other applications. So if you can either do the upgrade or you can also re-image. Some people are like, you know what, I'm just not comfortable with an upgrade. That's okay. I'm a kind of person to see it to believe it, so I understand that. You also would re-image if you're going from 32-bit to 64-bit, or if you're going from like BIOS to UEFI. Now there's a lot of ways to handle these situations with the task sequence and SCCM, so that's a whole nother topic, but know that it can be done. And then the other option is you can just stay on Windows 7 till 2020 when support expires and ride it out. I've been seeing this more in colleges, more so than K through 12, that either they don't have licensing for Windows 10, they didn't do the free upgrade when they were entitled to it, so there's a lot of reasons that you could still stay on Windows 7, but I encourage you, if you can move to 10, there are so many reasons to do it. So other questions I've been getting, not just whether I do 1607 or 1703 or 1803 or whatever the number is at the time, which edition of Windows do I actually put out there? Because we've had Home and Pro and Enterprise, and now they've released these education-specific editions that are designed just for the evolving K-12 education landscape. And this is Windows 10 Pro Education and Windows 10 Education. So Windows 10 Pro Education builds on the commercial version of Windows 10 Pro that provides a lot of these education-specific settings, such as disabling tips, tricks, and store suggestions. And Cortana is now enabled for accessibility after 1703. If you don't want to do Cortana for whatever reasons, there's plenty of ways to disable that with policies or registry keys. But we found due to accessibility reasons, it's been very, very helpful to have it turned on. So that's the Pro Education version. And then we have just Windows 10 Education. It's not Education Enterprise, it's just Education that is built on the Enterprise version of Windows 10 that also provides those education-specific settings. And this is our recommendation for all K-12 customers, as it provides by far the most complete and secure edition for education environments. You'll have to check in your volume licensing to see if you're entitled to this version. But the really cool thing about Windows 10 now is all these bits are in the ISO. I'll show you later when we get to SCCM stuff that when you go to install the ISO or bring in the WIM file, it has all the different versions in there, and it's literally based on what key you apply to it or what selection you make in the imaging process is the version you actually deploy. So managing Windows 10 and Microsoft Store tips, tricks, and suggestions. This is also a huge one I get. Best practice nowadays, don't customize a base image. Things are changing so fast, and it's a lot harder to customize the base image, and more things break when you try to customize the base image before deploying. We recommend utilizing group policy, or if you're using Intune or Intune for Education, to control a lot of those settings, or at least use PowerShell scripts post-imaging if you really need to pull out some of those apps or settings that you weren't able to do prior. If you pull it out post-imaging, you're not going to break all the profiles and stuff like you will if you try to do it in the custom image. And also using provisioning packages. This is the latest and greatest way of configuring Windows 10. Like I said, all the bits are already in there, so a provisioning package can do a lot of things like a task sequence. It can change the version of Windows, it can apply backgrounds, it can set up shared PC modes and stuff, and we'll get into that when I go over the configuration designer in just a little bit. So how to keep apps removed from Windows 10 when you're doing an update. I'm sure none of you have ever seen this, where you go and try to customize your either custom image and pull out the apps and then you do a feature upgrade and they all come back, or even in your imaging process you remove those apps post-imaging and then you do an upgrade and they come back. There's a way now. You can either create a registry key before the upgrade to figure out which apps you actually want to come back, or once you get to 1803, we fixed that issue. I should say fix. I wish you could see my quotes I'm doing. We fixed that issue, so going forward from 1803 on up, if you pull apps out, they should not come back unless you actually tell them to come back. Deployment and management options. So we talked about the different versions of Windows 10 and iterations and additions, but then all the different options for managing and deploying. Most of you probably have SCCM, which is wonderful. I've been preaching SCCM for a lot of years now, and it's still a great product. We have things like MDT, Ghost, Fog, provisioning packages using the configuration designer. We have Intune and Intune for Education. This allows you to control things from the cloud and the ability to just reset instead of re-image. And I apologize. We had somebody pop in saying they thought this was going to start at 2 o'clock. The answer is yes, and if we can, I think Eric already put a note in there. There's a little bit of confusion with start time, but one, this is being recorded, and two, I pre-recorded another session that I will provide the YouTube link, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. And we're just getting to the exciting part. All right, so to Autopilot, for those of you who haven't heard of this, Autopilot is another cloud-based method for deploying, and most of the big vendors are on board with this now. This gives you means if you're using Intune to manage your devices that, say you're putting in an order for 5,000 devices from HP. HP can associate those devices with your cloud tenant. So if you picture this, HP associates those with your tenant. You get all these devices, and let's say you got a one-to-one program where the students are never even coming on site. You can ship the devices right to them. They unbox them, open them up. Once they connect it to the Wi-Fi, it'll automatically have your company branding that you've put in there, and once they sign in with their school credentials, it will bring down the Intune policies and Intune applications, so you can completely wirelessly deploy devices. And this isn't just for one-to-one programs. This could be like, say you got a superintendent or an executive director that's off-site and breaks their computer. This is a very easy, cool way to manage those devices without ever having them come on site. All right, so deployment and management options. I'm going to run through some of these slides, and then if we have time, I'm going to run through actual demos in my environment. So for those of you that have SCCM, the servicing option is kind of the thing that you hear about, using like the servicing rings. I'm sure there's no confusion about that out there. The servicing option is great, but well, I'll show you more in detail on this. It's kind of like creating an automatic deployment rule, and that's great until something actually supersedes that update. I have the example of, I think it was 2 iterations of 1703 that came out last year, and if you had supersedence immediately superseding, then if you deployed 1703 already, as soon as the new one comes in, it's going to supersede the old one and go out again. So we had literally people doing 2 feature upgrades back to back automatically, being pretty disruptive because they were using that servicing method. So while it works great, I want you to have caution by using that servicing model. Now, my favorite still is using the task sequence for both imaging and upgrading. How many people? We have 8 people in here. How many people in here are using SCCM currently? Give me a yay or a hi. All right, I'll run through these slides quickly, and then I will go to my actual environment and walk through these. The task sequence is nice because it's a layered series of instructions. So instead of building a whole big custom image that has like Windows and Office and everything in it, it gives you the ability to layer all that. So as you can see, there's the apply operating system step. So when the new version of Windows 10 comes out, all you have to do is change what operating system it's pointing at. You don't have to change all your drivers and applications, so it's a very dynamic way of doing this. And you can pull in just the install.wim file from the ISO. You don't have to build a custom image. You just bring in Windows 10, it's already there for you. So the upgrade task sequence, which I will also show you, has come a long way. If you guys aren't on the latest and greatest SCCM, this is another reason to keep your SCCM upgraded, is there's a lot of cool new steps in here for managing your upgrade. Some things we ran into in the past were incompatible applications, drivers, antivirus. Now we're adding the means in there to remove those issues. All right, so deployment and management options. We talked about using SCCM, which is the standard. There's all the other ones, MDT and whatnot. But now going to more of a modern management method with the provisioning packages, we have a couple ways to do that. We have the Windows Configuration Designer, which formerly known as Wicked, and we have set up school PCs. And then for after that, once you provision the devices, which is like imaging, we have Intune and Intune for Education in the cloud to manage these devices. And before I get into the demos, the other thing after we get Windows 10 out there is how do we manage the apps? We're used to packaging up applications and things right now and then pushing them out. Well, we have the Store for Education. And I don't know if any of you have even seen the Store for Education, but it's a website that if you log in with an EDU address, it will only show education apps, and you can configure this private store. So right now, most of you have probably either been disabling the Microsoft Store because you just don't want people going there and getting all sorts of stuff, or if you're thinking of, you haven't gone to Windows 10 because you're scared of the store, this is a great way for you to configure and just make only the private store available and put the apps in there that you want the kids or teachers to have access to. You can also integrate the store with SCCM. So instead of having to go out there and find the MSIs and executables and package it and test it and all that, there's a lot of these apps that are in the store now that you can just integrate with SCCM and then deploy from SCCM. So this goes for required deployments and making available in Software Center. The other nice reason to go with using apps instead of the old-fashioned legacy Win32 apps is that apps stay updated. You don't have to deal with that. You can control if you don't want the apps to auto-update, but it's so nice for them to just stay updated on the latest and greatest. And the apps are much quicker and more lightweight. So instead of installing the heavy-duty Adobe Reader program, we have an Adobe Reader Touch app that you can deploy. So with that, I'm going to get ready to jump into my demos. So while we're waiting, I know there's a little bit of a potential mix-up where some people could be jumping in here at 2 o'clock. How about I take a couple questions or comments while I'm bringing up my demo environment? Okay, we have questions about getting directions on setting up the store for education. Is this just configuring the store, or do you want to actually integrate it with SCCM? Okay, I can help provide documentation on how to configure the store for education. And you can, with the store, you can assign apps to students or teachers. If you assign apps, they get an email saying, hey, this app is available for you, whether it's a paid or free version. Or you can set up and just make the store available. That's not an MDM solution, and it's not SCCM, so you can't push apps, but it's still a great way of kind of configuring a self-service portal of apps that you actually want. So I can follow up and make sure that that goes out with my presentation later. Bear with me just 1 minute while I get signed in here. Is there anybody that's just joining us? I really apologize for the slight mix-up in the timing. We are recording today's session, and I did pre-record a whole nother session on all the topics we were covering today, and it's up on YouTube, and I'll make sure you guys have that link. So how many of you are still dealing with Windows 7 and thinking about going to Windows 10? Is there anybody out there that has questions, or they're not sure about going to 10? I would love to hear reasons why. All right, so we have some on 7 and upgrading, and no SCCM. All right, we have someone at Windows 10 using FOG, been looking at SCCM. I'll talk briefly on if you haven't implemented SCCM before, this is a good time for you to take a quick look at the more modern management methods. If your licensing entitles you to Intune and Intune for Education, that is an awesome way of managing your devices. If you're a smaller school, you can't afford Intune or Intune for Education, and you want an easy way to provision, that's where we're going to be talking about using the configuration designer and some cheap USB sticks for deploying. All right, so this is SCCM. The first thing I want to run through is how to get your operating system image in here. For those of you who have SCCM and know how to do this, great, you got time to check your email. If you have SCCM but haven't done Windows 10 or haven't brought an image in, then I'm going to walk through this for you. So on operating system images, you're just going to right click and add an operating system image. And you browse out to where the actual WIM file is. And this is by far not a production environment, so don't judge me on my using the C drive. And you can tell I got the little asterisk there, or not asterisk, exclamation point. It's looking for an actual WIM file. So once it has a WIM, and this doesn't have to be the install.wim, you can still build a custom image. I will not judge for that. You can use MDT to build a WIM file and bring it in here. So after you grab the WIM file, it automatically knows that this is a Windows 10 for education. And we can put in the version for notes. And that's as hard as it is to bring in Windows 10 into SCCM. On the Details tab, it's so cool. You can come down here and remember I said there's all the different versions within the ISO? So here they are. So when you go to actually deploy that, you can pick and choose which one you want. Now with everything in SCCM, there's always like 50 steps to do things, right? I'm sure everybody's nodding their head to agree. So after you bring in the ISO, you still have to distribute it. See how this one's green? I did it earlier. This one's not, it's gray. So you'd have to right click on it, distribute this content. And you would pick your distribution point. And once the content's distributed, now this is available to use for putting in a task sequence. So if you're not used SCCM, but maybe you've used MDT, then you've heard of a task sequence before. But I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to create one from scratch. I've created a couple, obviously. We're going to create a task sequence and install an existing image package. And I'm just going to say Windows 10. Some of you are much better at putting notes in and descriptions. You're going to browse out and grab a boot image. Hopefully most of you are using 64-bit. If you're still using 32, I'm sure there's valid reasons for it. You all have brand new equipment in your environments, right? So we're going to browse out, and I have two in here because I pulled one in earlier. You're going to grab the operating system image, and this is again where you choose which edition you want to deploy. Earlier I talked about Windows 10 Pro Education and Education, so this is the more enterprise version. You can partition and format the computer's hard drive, and then it'll configure it for BitLocker if you are using BitLocker in your environment. You can specify a product key, and you can enable a local admin account with a password. I always recommend doing this even if you want to change it later with a script or with Active Directory just for troubleshooting purposes. If for whatever reason it doesn't join the domain, it's very nice to have that. I'm going to just do a work group here because this is testing and I can really type. You could choose to join a domain and browse out, grab your domain, and then pick and choose what OU you want it to dump in. This is super cool. You can set up different logics on each step. So you can say, like, if the computer name is like this, put it in this OU. So you can make it a very dynamic process. And if you are joining the domain, you'll specify an account to use for the domain join. We're going to install the SCCM client. You can do user state migration. I'm not going to cover that today. Plus, if you're going from like Windows 7 to 10 and doing an upgrade, you don't need to do a migration. It'll do it for you. I'm not going to install any software updates. You have to have SCCM doing the updates in your environment for this to work. Plus, if you keep your image updated, which is very easy to do with an SCCM, then you don't need to do this in the process and lengthen your imaging process. If you wanted to install any applications along the way, you could pick and choose those. And I just rebuilt my environment literally days ago, so I don't have any applications packaged yet. And you can have up to 99 applications in here. So if you do have that many, please choose if one fails to continue installing. Otherwise, it'll hold up your whole imaging process. And again, I will reiterate for those joining, I'm really sorry about the mix-up in timing. We actually did start at 1:30, but I'm recording this session, and I also pre-recorded another session earlier to cover all the stuff very in depth that'll be available on YouTube when we're done. So don't feel like you're missing anything or that you have to take very, very good notes because I'm going to provide these videos for you. Because I've been told I work at Jody speed, and not everybody works at Jody speed, so sometimes you need to pause me, and a video is the best way to do that. All right, so we've created a task sequence. And now if we take a look at that, we can right-click and edit it. And you can see these series of instructions. It'll restart in WinPE, it will format, and it has logic on each of these steps to determine if it should do it for BIOS or UEFI. And you can configure each one of these. I recommend leaving it alone if you can, because Windows 10 and UEFI is happiest with these partitions. And then it's going to apply the operating system. So this is where, let's say you're doing 1803 now, but in fall when 18.0, I'm guessing 9 comes out, all you'd have to do is bring in that image and switch it out in this spot. You don't have to recreate your task sequence. So then apply Windows settings. You can change any of these that you want. And you can set your time zone. A lot of the stuff you're probably used to using an unattend file for. And then apply network settings. So if you wanted to come back and choose join a domain. You could also copy any of these steps and paste them. So if you wanted to put logic on these steps, you could say put it in this OU if the computer name's like this, or if it's in a certain IP range, or there's a lot of different things that you can do this by. And the same goes for applying device drivers. You can have SCCM auto-apply the drivers, or you can do driver packages. Most of the big named vendors like HP and Dell, and I think Lenovo is even finally on board with good integration with SCCM for creating driver packages. SCCM is really good these days about doing Windows 10 drivers, but sometimes you have custom configs or video cards, and you have to do a driver package. And on that note, if there's something that still doesn't apply in the driver package, you can still package that up separately as a package or application and force it, like an NVIDIA graphics install or something. You can still do that. It's then going to apply the Config Manager client install and then go on to do any other applications, or if you wanted to do packages, you can do scripts, command lines. That's the nice thing about SCCM is if you can think it, it can do it. All right, so we brought an operating system image in, we created a task sequence. Then to deploy this, you just right-click and deploy, and you're going to pick the collection of computers you want to deploy to. Now, I ran a PowerShell script earlier for operational collections. If you guys haven't seen this, it's a free script that creates all these nice custom collections for you. And if you're not an SCCM person and don't know what collections are, it's kind of like OUs. It's just a way to group devices and users. So I'm going to deploy to, we'll just say all systems active. There's none in there, but I'm feeling safe with that right now. This option to pre-download content ahead of time, if you're not Pixie booting and you want content to pre-download ahead of time, this comes in really handy with like an upgrade task sequence, so you can make sure the content is just there. I'm going to make this just available to ConfigMan clients for my environment, but in your real world, you would probably be doing only media in Pixie. If you do ConfigMan clients, that means it's going to be in Software Center, and somebody can pick that and potentially re-image their own machine, which, you know, they might need it, but we're not quite there yet. So you would choose only media in Pixie and available just to make it available for Pixie boot, or starting it from a USB drive. If you make it required, this will send it out to your environment. You will be imaging Windows 10 with whatever computers is in that collection. This works great if you're re-imaging labs, you know, or doing mass quantities, but I just caution you to make sure you know what you're deploying. If you don't check anything here, it'll just be available as soon as possible. I always show task sequence progress, and then here's an option if you have internet-based client management or the cloud management gateway, or are using Intune co-management and you want to run it from the internet, you can. For those of you who didn't know that, SCCM can actually image from the internet now. Only create alerts if you're going to look at them, and tell it, I usually say download content locally. There's sometimes an option when you're doing an upgrade task sequence to always download content ahead of time. I just have a lot better luck with pre-downloading the content before it actually starts running. Now there's a ton of other details to go into here, but we just don't have enough time today. I had a question about the theoretical limit of the number of machines that you can image at a time. There's a lot of factors that go into that. How robust your network is, how beefy your SCCM server is. Are you giving it the 90-some gigs of RAM that... So the question is, can we do 10,000 at one time? Yeah, the 96 gigs, Eric. Thank you. I have not ever tried to do 10,000 machines all at the same time. I don't know of anybody that's come close to that. You can schedule these required deployments. So you could say, do this lab, and that lab at 5 o'clock. Do the next lab at 6 o'clock. I would not recommend doing 10,000 at once. I just can see nothing great coming out of that. But I would do scheduled required deployments, staggering them so it doesn't take down your network. The other question is, won't it auto-queue all devices? It kind of auto-queues, but it will also try to do all of them at once, and it will pretty much bog down your server and or your network. Another question is, how many is typical then for imaging at once? I usually see people doing this a lab at a time. Now you can, if you have multiple labs set up and a collection of just your labs, I could see easily imaging if you have the right infrastructure in place, you know, doing probably 500 to 1,000 at a time. But every environment is so different that you really would have to test to see how it's going to behave. All right, so that's deploying a task sequence for imaging, but now what if we want to just do the upgrade? So earlier I brought in an operating system image. Now I'm going to bring in an actual upgrade package. So the difference being is an image I pulled from a WIM file. An upgrade package, you actually need to have all the files from the ISO. Yeah, make sure I'll show you what that looks like. I'm not making any assumptions here today. So the upgrade has all the normal files you would see in the ISO. So when you go to create this upgrade package, you're going to browse out again and grab the folder. And if I didn't say thank you to everybody for jumping on today, I really appreciate you taking this time, because I have been getting so many questions and I feel bad that I couldn't be at the Spring Maids conference this year to kind of help word off some of those. So we're going to pick what architecture, what language. And I'm feeling English today, and most every day. You can put in extra comments if you want. And that brought in the upgrade package. And like before, you need to distribute that content. You see how it's gray? That needs to go green. It'll go yellow while it's in progress, and if it fails, I usually see a failure because the path isn't quite right. Check your UNC path, or you run out of disk space. That's very typical. So we have an upgrade package, and now we're going to create a task sequence for doing that upgrade. So similar to before, we're going to create a task sequence, but this time we're going to do an upgraded operating system image from an upgrade package. I'm getting creative with naming the more of these that I do. I'm going to browse out and grab that upgrade package we just brought in. And again, we can pick what edition we want to do, and we can specify a key at the time if we want. If we don't, it will use KMS. I'm not going to install any updates right now. It is nice to put applications in here if you're doing an upgrade. Most people, when they're doing like 7 to 10 or 10 to 10 or 8 to 10, you're usually upgrading Office or other things along the way. So you could kind of, I don't want to say tackle 2 things at once, but you could upgrade your Windows, your Office, your Java, all that fun stuff in one task sequence. And you can say if an application fails, then continue on. So we created that upgrade task sequence, and just like the other one, we would deploy that task sequence, but with an upgrade, it has to be a known existing computer, because you can't upgrade something that is unknown or doesn't have Windows on it already. So your only option for this will be available in only Config Manager clients, because it has to have the agent on there in order for it to communicate and know that there's an upgrade available. So I'm going to cancel this for right now. So that's doing a task sequence for imaging from scratch or re-imaging a computer. We covered upgrading using an upgrade task sequence, and then the other method is that Windows 10 servicing. For those of you who have done automatic deployment rules, this is an automatic deployment rule for your feature upgrades. And we're all clear on the difference between our monthly updates and our feature upgrades? Completely clear. So we have our monthly quality updates with Windows 10 that are completely cumulative, and then we have the twice a year major feature upgrades, whether it's going from the 1709 to 1803 or whatnot. That's what the servicing is for, to keep your feature upgrades moving along. So if you had Windows 10 in your environment, you would see nice rings in here with all the different versions, and then if you scroll down below, there's a chart that shows you, this has nothing to do with your environment, this is strictly showing you when the different versions are going to be going out of service. So I had a question about how does SCCM work with WSUS. SCCM will control WSUS. So I recommend putting WSUS on the same box. You can use a different WSUS server, but when you could install the WSUS role on the server, you let SCCM control it with the software update point role. And if I have time, hopefully I can get into it. Otherwise, I am completely open to future topics that we can cover. So the more people that say, hey, I want to know about WSUS and SCCM, let me know. All right, so if we have WSUS on the server and we have the Windows 10 updates configured right, you will see the different feature upgrades in here. And what I did is I created a servicing plan, which is kind of the same thing as an automatic deployment rule. And I'll just show you what this looks like. So this is kind of the set it and forget it. I recommend using the servicing if you're going to not do things day one. If you set this and forget it, and everything just upgrades to whatever in fall, because we have a tendency to release these feature upgrades at the best times for schools, right? In the spring right now when you're too busy to test, and then in the fall right after you've already gone back to school. So we don't want your computers to all upgrade in August or September right when everybody's coming back to school. So by default, this rule approves any license agreements for you, and you're going to pick your target collections. You can have multiple servicing plans, so you can have the first plan target your like 0-day computers, you know, some of your IT computers or test computers, and then you can have another servicing plan that does maybe a section from each different department, so you can test them ahead of time and make sure you don't have problems with those applications. And then you can go out and have the last servicing ring do everybody else, excluding the HVAC people, which you can never upgrade. All right, so the deployment ring, the semi-annual channel targeted, this is basically the current branch day one, you know, you get it, semi-annual channel, is the 6-month delay. And you can, beyond that, you can still say how many days afterwards, up to 120 days, you want to delay the upgrade. Going back to a question earlier about being cautious and upgrades, I would give it at least a month if it were me, just to make sure we work out all those bugs for you. And then on the Upgrades tab, if you've seen an automatic deployment rule, you can get very selective about what upgrades there are. So I narrowed it down to English, and then this Business Edition's version 1803 and US. And you ask, how did I get that? This preview button is wonderful. Based on your rule, it'll tell you what that returns. So that's how I found this version. Because if you don't pick one, let's say I uncheck that, and I hit preview, now I have 60 upgrades in here. And you guys know how big these upgrades are. So 60 of these times about 5 gigs each, that's going to be a massive upgrade package. So please break your upgrades down, or you're going to have major issues with them going out, because most of the computers do not have room for that. The evaluation schedule, this is how often the rule just runs. This is not when it deploys. This is when it goes out and evaluates to see if there's any updates that fit that category. The other bonus about specifying, like this 1803, it's not dynamically going to go and just get whatever. It's only going to be the 1803 one. So kind of covering yourself there. So on the deployment schedule, this is most what we care about. This is when our clients are going to get impacted. So I like to make them available as soon as possible. And this is great for testing or IT people, because this will make it available like in Software Center. So you can go in and run it and manually test it. But then the deadline is when D-Day is going to happen. So if you say make it available right now, but the deadline's a week later, by day 7, if they haven't ran it from Software Center, they will get that upgrade. And then on the deployment itself, and then user experience is where you control what the user sees. I recommend putting it in Software Center and only showing notifications for restarts. And then when the deadline's reached, what do? Go ahead and do the update, but don't do a restart. For the non-SCCM people here, there's maintenance windows you can set on your group's collections that specify when it's okay to do updates. So if you have critical labs and things that can't get updates during a certain time frame, you can specify that so you don't interrupt students in the middle of the day, or staff for whatever. They don't like that either. So device restart behavior, you can control suppressing restarts. Even if I'm not deploying to servers, I always check that box just to cover myself. And then if you want to suppress the restarts on workstations, just know if you suppress these that your numbers probably won't ever show that the upgrade happened, because until that reboot happens, it's not successful. And then whether or not you want it to run the deployment eval cycle after the next restart. This is mostly applicable, I see, with like Office updates, but if they're doing restarts and reboots, I go ahead and check that box. All right, so those are the 3 ways to kind of deploy and maintain Windows 10 with SCCM. Now, I also promised you guys a quick and easy way with the Configuration Designer. Now, before I move on to the Configuration Designer, do we have any quick questions about Windows 10 deployments with SCCM that I can try to cover now or to put on the next topics list? All right, great. And feel free to put them in the chat window as we go along if you think of things. So the Windows Configuration Designer is an app in the App Store. So this is a free app that you can go get. It's also part of the Windows 10 ADK. And if you install it from the ADK, you get that version, and it's that same version unless you uninstall and reinstall ADKs. So I recommend using the app version because this will stay updated. There's a couple different options in here. I'm just going to cover the provision desktop devices, which is by far the easiest. I have a lot of people want to use the kiosk mode, trying to get rid of deep freeze, save some more money there. And then advanced provisioning, which I will show you. We love deep freeze. All right, so I'm being very sarcastic, by the way. You can name your project, and this is where it's going to save it. And then this is a very simple wizard. So it says to enter a name, and you can do dynamic variables. This is probably not your same naming convention that you're used to, because most everything now is going to kind of a user-based scenario, so we're not focusing so much on the actual devices. But you can still do things like serial numbers. You can enter a product key. You can also configure devices for shared use. If you do this, it allows for a much quicker logon, and it forces them to store all their work in the cloud. And this is great for shared lab devices, shared carts. It will also do policies that will auto-clean up profiles for you, because nobody's ever dealt with too many profiles building up. That's one of the biggest reasons I would re-image over like Thanksgiving and Christmas break. If you check this remove pre-installed software, this is nice because if you're getting brand new devices and they're coming with a bunch of bloatware on them, it will remove it for you. But if you do that, it adds about 20 minutes to the provisioning process. So just keep that in mind. If you know your devices aren't coming with it on there, don't check that box. And I also actually have a better way of using Windows bootable media and an unattended file to basically reinstall Windows faster than you can reset a device. But it's there, so some people like that. It's still a hands-free way of removing the bloatware. The next option is setting up a network. So this is for provisioning and putting a profile on the device. My husband works in IT, so he set me up a nice, easy network for provisioning. And you can push out other profiles after the fact, whether it's using Intune or SCCM. And then on account management, these are your options. So many people think that a provisioning package is only for cloud stuff. Yeah, we love it if you put things in the cloud because it's easy, but not all of us have that option. So you still can enroll in your local AD. You can specify a domain, username for the domain join. You can create local admin accounts. You can enroll it in Azure Active Directory. So this is the way of modern management. If you're looking at getting away from your local AD, you're just starting over, you're going from Novell, which I still run into that, you can just enroll in Azure AD. If you want to do that, you click this Get Bulk Token, and this will force you to sign in with your global admin credentials. That has to have permissions to create this bulk enrollment token. And then that will store that in this provisioning package so you can provision multiple devices with that one token. This kind of takes the place of using an account to join the domain. With that, you can still specify local admin accounts. And if you want, you can still do just local admin. So if you're doing a work group computer, you can do that too. Then we're going to go on and add applications. I know it's 2:30 already, and we started early, but if any of you still have a few minutes, I can keep talking and we can keep recording because I got a couple other things I would love to show you if that's okay. If you drop off because you have to go, I will not be offended, okay? This is being recorded. All right, so most of us that are used to pushing out applications with like group policy or SCCM, you usually have to go out and find the silent install command lines and deal with a whole bunch of testing. This will do it for you. So although I can't exactly endorse the Google Chrome browser, I know that pretty much everybody still uses it. So when I grabbed the MSI, it automatically pulled in the silent command line for me. I didn't have to figure it out. I just name it. And you can say continue installation after failure. This is like in SCCM where you can specify multiple applications, and if one fails, do you want it to keep going? Whether or not you want to force a restart. And then required app dependencies. So if you have like a document camera that requires Adobe Air, you could actually bring in dependencies. So I can add that application, and you can keep going and add in, let's go with VLC. It brought in the command line for that. And if you ever do something not quite right, it'll have that little yellow thing on there saying you didn't do it right. So you got to have green check marks. You can add in certificates, so if you have a cert you need for Wi-Fi or something, you can put that in too. And this is just for initial provisioning. The provisioning package is meant for like a new device at the out-of-box experience state. So when you get a brand new device, you open it up and Cortana's talking and she's saying, you know, what language do you want or what region? That's the out-of-box state. So if you're not getting brand new devices, I can provide the method with creating that bootable media to get it there. So after you create this package, it gives you a little summary. You can protect it with a password if you want. And then you create this provisioning package. So this package size without any applications in it is only a couple hundred meg. It's very small. So the more applications you add in there, the bigger it gets. Some people put Office and other things in there because they don't have the greatest wireless networks. But this is a very quick and easy, simple, free provisioning tool. This is, again, assuming Windows 10 is already there, so if Windows 10 is there, why change it? Now, if you have different versions of Windows 10, this won't do an upgrade for you, so you need to make sure that it's the right version of 10 that you're going to put out there. So it tells you where this package is, and then you have two things here. You have a provisioning package and a security catalog. These are what you're going to copy into the root of a thumb drive. It doesn't have to be a formatted drive, just a USB drive. And you can have multiple provisioning packages on a thumb drive. So if you had multiple ones on there and you pop that thumb drive into a laptop and it says, all right, which package do you want? You can pick and choose. So you can have multiple lab provisioning packages, you can have staff provisioning packages. All right, so that's how you create the provisioning package. But what if this isn't enough settings for you? You can switch to the advanced editor. It does warn you this is a one-way ticket. Once you go complex, you can't go back. But I just want to show you all the different settings. Actually, I'm not going to show you all of them, but just so you can see what are in here. So if you want to add additional accounts, user accounts, and passwords, you can do some clean PC stuff. If you want to add in additional Wi-Fi profiles, you can. You can set background images, edition upgrades, personalization, different policies, these provisioning commands. You can put PowerShell scripts in here. This is where I added in Chrome. So you can see that there's the file and the command line is all built in here if you need to go in and change anything. We have shared PC settings. So when you think of these settings here, this is kind of similar to when you were creating a custom image before. This is provisioning. This is how you want the device to be right after you provision it. Then you use something like Group Policy or Intune and Intune for Education to manage further settings and applications after the fact. So if you make changes in here, you would just export this provisioning package and then you put that on a USB drive and plug it into a device. This is a very, very fast way of provisioning and wirelessly. I always get that question, when's SCCM going to be able to wirelessly image? I'm just not sure if that's going to happen. Don't quote me on that, but this way, as long as you have Wi-Fi available, and honestly, if you're not joining the domain or Azure AD, you don't even need Wi-Fi if you're just creating local admin accounts if you're that small. But all you need is Wi-Fi to provision these devices. And when you stick this USB stick into a device, it'll only need to be there 20 to 60 seconds depending on how much software you have on there, because what it does is it copies that provisioning package and those files down locally to the machine and then starts provisioning. So it'll actually tell you, hey, you can now remove that USB and go to the next device. So with USB 3 devices, you can provision a classroom full of computers literally in 5 to 10 minutes. So as you know, these devices, USB 3 devices or thumb drives, are super cheap now and very fast. And somebody even told me about a new USB thing that's out the other day, but I can't keep up with that. And whether the devices have it on it, I don't know. But whatever it is at the time, the fastest method to deploy this will be awesome. All right, so this is creating the provisioning package with the configuration designer. Now we also have set up school PCs. I'm not going to save that for right now. Is this the most exciting things you guys thought was going to happen today? And if any of you have come to any of my trainings, you know I can talk for up to 6 hours. So I can talk a long time. And I know we're not going to cover everything today, but I'm really hoping that doing these kind of webinars every couple of weeks will be a means of training for you, keeping you educated on what's going on out there, and we will schedule some that allow for some live Q&A time, and you can always feel free to reach out to me. Just I ask that we don't all do it at the same time, or you might get a delayed response. Okay, so we just used the configuration designer tool to create a provisioning package. The Setup School PCs is also an app that's just kind of a pretty skin for the configuration designer tool, but it's very wizard driven. This goes hand in hand with our Intune for Education product that's really meant to be simplified, wizardized, easy for you guys to do, but this one is strictly cloud-based. So this will not pertain to doing local AD or workgroup. But you can create a provisioning package with this and then import it into the configuration designer and edit it, because this tool does a lot of cool things, especially when it comes to student devices. So the first thing this would do is it would prompt you to sign in with your Office 365 credentials so you can get that bulk enrollment token that we mentioned previously. I'm going to skip that for now for time's sake. You can add a Wi-Fi network. What I love about this tool is it automatically sees your Wi-Fi networks and will validate for you if you're on a device that's connected to that Wi-Fi. If you try to skip it, it's going to warn you to make sure to have a wired connection, because this trying to get out to Azure AD it has to have an internet connection. And then naming the devices. This kind of does a step for you. It will automatically hyphenate and put the serial number afterwards for you. And then there's that remove apps pre-installed that we talked about earlier that adds more time to it. There's tips and tricks over here too. And then this allow local storage. If you don't check this, you won't have access to the C drive. So we're trying to do this for shared devices to force the students or the CART devices to not allow you to store locally. Kids are used to storing in the cloud, whether it's Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox or I don't know what boxes. They're used to storing in the cloud. So let's help get everybody there so we don't ever have to worry about people leaving stuff on a device and it being our fault for imaging over it. All right, so optimized device for a single student. So if you were doing a one-to-one scenario, it would not do the shared cart policies and settings. The shared cart scenario, not only does it clean up profiles automatically for you, but it sets some maintenance schedules so that the devices will kick on at midnight and try to install updates. And also if it runs into a problem with the updates, it will automatically roll back for you. You can browse out and specify a pretty lock screen background. That's a really nice one, but you can specify. It will review what you've said, and then it asks you to put a USB drive in now. So this is a nice step because it automatically forces you to put a USB drive in, and it copies the package, the files over that you need. And then it also prompts you afterwards for if you want to make additional USB drives. So again, this is strictly for a cloud-based scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and next out of that, but you can see how that was a little bit simpler than doing the configuration designer, and it even tells you, hey, what kind of screen should you be at to put this provisioning package in. So what I mentioned earlier is I have a way to create Windows 10 bootable media. I use Rufus. It's very simple. I put an unattended file on there to handle the prompts for formatting the hard drive and whatnot. And then if you put this provisioning package or a single provisioning package on that same thumb drive, it will enroll the device in your AD, your Azure AD, Intune. It will install those applications, do all those things for you in one step. So with one USB 3 drive, you can provision a device from start to finish, installing Windows and putting apps and things on there in roughly 7 to 10 minutes, depending how many applications there are. So that's super quick, it's wireless, it's easy. You can literally round up, high school, middle school kids and have an unboxing provisioning party with USB drives. You don't have to have Pixie Boot in place. You don't have to maintain a big SCCM infrastructure. So I'm a huge proponent of this. Do I hope that we can get you on Intune and Intune for Education for doing the cloud-based management? Yes, but that's probably not for everybody today. Also, with our new licensing model, almost everybody's going to own Intune for Education, so I like to start mentioning that. All right, so we talked about how to deal with Windows 10 with SCCM and the cheap free ways with the Configuration Designer and Setup School PCs. We touched on the Store for Education and the different editions of Windows. I know I've talked for a long time already, and I'd like to open this up to some questions in the chat window for anybody that potentially missed anything earlier or have questions about anything I've said so far. And if there's no questions, I can either talk more or we can call it a day. I'm going to leave that up to you guys. Okay, we have a question about the kiosk. Doing that kiosk provisioning package, that will work in conjunction with a group policy to lock the device down. So you can literally force it to log on with a set account, and then basically it removes that account every time, so you can get rid of deep freeze. You can also, with the Setup School PCs and the Configuration Designer, you could have it be like just a guest account, but that it wipes it every time, the actual files associated with it. So I've had quite a few colleges get rid of deep freeze just doing this. So if that's something of curiosity, I can get you some information on that too. And then I had a question about, can SCCM run in a VM or does it need its own box? That depends on the size of your infrastructure. Most companies with about 150,000 or less devices can get away with a VM as long as it's a beefy VM. So with like most SCCM questions, it really depends on the size of your environment and the infrastructure you have. So any other questions? Will Intune be included with EES? It won't be included with EES, but they're changing or having an additional licensing model where you can get A3, which is Microsoft A3 Education, where Intune and SCCM and all that's included. And from what I understand, it's about the same price as EES. So that's a pretty good question for whoever you go through, whether it's CDW, CDWG. And if you have further questions, feel free to hit me up on that. Right now, Intune is an add-on. But with that, Intune for Education is included with the A3 licensing, or if you purchase Intune for Education in addition to your EES, you automatically own Intune. Intune for Education is just a skin for, or an easy button for Intune, and I can actually bring that up pretty quick for you. And Intune, as you know, is a full MDM solution. Intune for Education strictly does Windows 10 now, and it will be doing iOS shortly. Intune does Android, iOS, Mac OS, everything, with the exception of Chromebooks. I'm sorry, I don't know if that'll ever happen. I wish we could all come to agreement, but that's not up to me. So a lot of people have been looking at Intune as a cost savings because they can do their other devices with that, whether it's bring your own or managing their Mac iOS devices. Can you share your contact info?. One, I will provide my email. And then I had a question, do you have a method using all free tools for imaging? Well, that depends on the complexity of your environment. Um, are you looking at joining just local AD? Because if it's just local Active Directory, that configuration designer for provisioning along with a bootable media could be a good solution for you. Now, if you have 50,000 devices, you might not want to run around with thumb drives. But the nice thing about once we get on Windows 10 and using a provisioning package, then you can just reset the device from the actual device with a couple of keystrokes. So what that does is when you hit these keystrokes, it resets Windows and reapplies the provisioning package, so it would like rejoin your local AD and everything that for you. So you really don't need to image a machine again once you have it on Windows 10 with a provisioning package. If you're using like Intune or Intune for Education, you can reset those devices from the cloud. All right, so I have another question about less than 2,000 PCs. My concern is having enough RAM for SCCM. Yes, SCCM with a couple thousand PCs, they really recommend 96 gigs, which I know is not feasible for most people. I see people get by with 16, but it really runs best around 16 to 32. If you are running as low as 8, you're going to see some performance issues, so you would just need a lot of patience. And make sure when you're setting up SCCM that you configure your SQL to only use between 50 and 80% of the memory so it doesn't eat up all your memory. So yes, to answer your question about the free tools for imaging, that would be using the Configuration Designer tool in a thumb drive. So what I can do is I can provide Eric with my how to create the bootable media with Rufus and the unattend file, and then you guys have my videos here on how to create configuration packages. Yes, you're famous, Eric. Then you can create this bootable media to install Windows and put a provisioning package on there all in one step wirelessly. So as long as you have Wi-Fi, you have either an open network or a network you can stand up that has a password currently for it to connect to your local AD, then you can use these free tools. Is that cool? All right. Links. All right. One last thing I'm bringing up right now. I just want to show you the Intune for Education portal because this is where everything is going, and you might not be there yet. It might not be in your licensing yet, but it's going to be someday. Most of you have Chromebooks. It's okay. I'll never judge you for having Chromebooks. They're wonderful for their purpose, and they absolutely serve the purpose for what they're doing most of the time, and it's better than nothing. And my portal's coming up any minute. You'll probably... I won't pry SCCM out of anybody's cold hands, and Eric, I hope you don't ever die in my lifetime. And we will continue to support SCCM for a very, very long time, so you don't have to worry about that. But someday when your SCCM is acting up and you're tired of dealing with it and you want an easier way and your licensing entitles you to it, then you'll be more open to talking Intune for Education. All right, so very quickly, this is what Intune for Education looks like. For most of you that have Chromebooks and like a Chrome management console, this gives you a very, very simple way to manage your apps and settings based on groups either from AD or Azure AD, or that can dynamically pull in from your school information system. And I'll put this in the chat window, this IntuneEducationPortal.com. We can actually do free trials of it. If you're going to do a free trial, I just recommend you don't tie it to your current tenant, because if you ever want to do a full trial later, it's harder to set that up. But if you want to just go in and play, feel free, and I would be glad to help with that. So I have some follow-up. I will get Eric the method on how to create the bootable media and the links to my videos. And information on how to set up the store for education. Is there anything else right now, or even bring up future topics? All right, the kiosk. And then you guys can go ahead and let Eric know if there's any topics you really want to hear from me in the future. Like I said, I'm hoping to do these kind of bi-weekly, so I am here to help you. So let me know what your needs are. If it's more training on SCCM, how to do applications. If you want to learn more about cloud management, just let us know and I will be here to help you. So we have technically 9 minutes left on this the second hour and a half of me talking here. Are there any last questions? I really, really appreciate everybody's time today. You have my email. I will get Eric a copy of the presentation I did today. I'll share the video I did earlier along with this recording. So thank you guys so much for your time today, and good luck with your last couple days of the school year, and hopefully I can make this summer and fall a lot better for you. All right, take care, guys.